What if the quietest person you know carried the loudest secrets? What if the man who clips the hedges and sweeps the leaves at your local high school once held the weight of 27 lives in his hands? What if a single forgotten story could change everything you thought you knew about a stranger? In the small town of Millfield, Ohio, where the autumn leaves paint the ground in fiery hues of amber and crimson every October, there's a man who blends into the background like the faded paint on the school's old brick walls. His name is Henry Whitaker, a gardener at Millfield High with hands rough as the bark of the ancient oaks lining the schoolyard. Every morning at 6 a.m., long before the first bell rings, Henry is there, his graying hair tucked under a worn baseball cap, his overalls stained with earth, pushing a wheelbarrow across the dew-kissed grass. The students barely notice him, just another fixture in their daily grind, like the rusty flagpole in the courtyard or the flickering lights in the cafeteria. But if you look closer, past the stoop of his shoulders and the slow shuffle of his boots, you'll see the scars. Not just the faint white lines crisscrossing his knuckles, but the kind that live in his eyes. Hollow, like the empty plots where flowers refuse to grow. Those eyes have seen things no one in Millfield could imagine, things buried deeper than the roots of the maple trees he tends with such care. Henry's life moves in quiet rhythms, tied to the seasons of the Midwest. In the spring, he plants marigolds along the school's entrance, a nod to the old tradition of welcoming warmth after the brutal Ohio winters. Come summer, he mows the lawns under the relentless sun, the scent of cut grass mixing with the sweat on his brow, while the town buzzes with 4th of July parades and backyard barbecues, events Henry never attends. Fall brings the raking of leaves, a task he does with a kind of reverence, as if each brittle fragment reminds him of something lost. And in winter, when the snow blankets Millfield in silence, he clears the paths with a shovel, his breath fogging in the frigid air, a lone figure against the grey sky. The townsfolk know him as Old Hank, the guy who's always been there, steady as the church bell on Sunday mornings. But steady doesn't mean whole. There's a crack in Henry, one that runs deeper than the frozen ground beneath his feet. It's in the way his hands tremble when a car backfires on Main Street, the way he flinches at the sound of fireworks on Independence Day, the way he sits alone at the diner on Elm Street, nursing a black coffee, staring into the distance as if he's looking for something or someone who'll never come back. Henry lives in a modest trailer on the edge of town, near the cornfields that stretch endlessly under the wide Ohio sky. Inside, the walls are bare, except for a single black and white photograph on the nightstand. A group of young men in military uniforms, their faces full of grit and hope, standing shoulder to shoulder in a muddy field somewhere far from Millfield. He never speaks of it, not to the cashier at the local Kroger, not to the principal who thanks him for keeping the school grounds pristine, not even to himself in the quiet hours before dawn. But the past isn't something you can bury. Not really. It lingers like the smell of gunpowder after a shot, like the echo of a scream in a dream you can't shake. Every day, Henry fights to keep it locked away. He focuses on the small things, the weight of the gardening shears in his hand, the rhythm of his steps along the gravel paths, the chatter of students drifting through open windows as they talk about prom or football games. He tells himself he's fine, that he's moved on, that the war is a chapter closed long ago. But some wounds never heal. They just scab over, waiting for the slightest nudge to tear open again. On a crisp October morning, with the air smelling of apple cider and the first hints of frost, Henry is out by the school's back lot, pruning the overgrown bushes near the football field. The leaves crunch under his boots, and the distant sound of the marching band practicing for the homecoming game floats over the bleachers. It's a routine day just like any other, the kind where the world feels safe and predictable. He's lost in thought, his mind drifting to the way the sun filters through the trees when a shadow falls across his path. He looks up, squinting against the light, to see a kid standing there. A freshman maybe, with a mop of unruly brown hair and a backpack slung over one shoulder. The boy's name is Tyler Evans, one of those curious types who's always asking questions in history class, the kind of kid who'd rather read about D-Day than throw a football. Tyler's holding something in his hands, something small and metallic that glints in the sunlight. Henry's breath catches just for a second as he recognizes it. A tarnished military dog tag, the kind he hasn't seen in decades, the kind he thought he'd left behind in the muddy trenches of a life he no longer claims. "Mr. Whitaker," Tyler says, his voice hesitant but piercing, cutting through the quiet like a knife through cloth. "I found this in the library archives, in a box of old stuff from the alumni. It's got your name on it, says you were in Vietnam, and there's a newspaper clipping with it and about some kind of medal for saving people, a lot of people." The boy's eyes are wide, searching, not with judgment but with awe, the kind of look that strips a man bare. Henry feels the ground shift beneath him, as if the earth itself is opening up to swallow him whole. His hands tighten around the pruning shears, knuckles white, and for the first time in years, he can't find the words to brush someone off with a grunt or a nod. The past isn't just knocking on his door, it's kicking it down, and Henry knows in that gut-wrenching moment that there's no running from it anymore. Tyler steps closer, holding out the dog tag like it's a relic, a piece of a puzzle he's desperate to solve. 27 lives, the boy whispers, reading from a folded piece of yellowed paper in his other hand. "It says you saved 27 men in one day. How come nobody knows? How come you never told anyone?" The questions hang heavy in the air, thicker than the morning mist rolling in from the fields. Henry's chest tightens, his mind flashing to a jungle half a world away, to the sound of gunfire and the weight of bodies slung over his shoulders, to the faces of men he couldn't save, faces that still haunt him every time he closes his eyes. He wants to walk away, to turn his back on this kid and the piece of metal that's more burden than honor, but his feet won't move. For the first time in decades, Henry Whitaker feels seen, not as the invisible gardener of Millfield High, but as the man who walked through hell and came out the other side, carrying ghosts he thought he'd buried forever. Henry Whitaker stands frozen, the pruning shears still gripped in his calloused hands, the weight of Tyler's words pressing down on him like a concrete slab. The crisp October air bites at his skin, carrying the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves, but it's not the chill that makes his fingers tremble. It's the dog tag in Tyler's outstretched hand, a dull piece of metal that gleams with the sharp edge of memories Henry thought he'd buried under years of silence. His chest tightens, each breath shallow, as if the air itself is too heavy to pull in. 27 lives. The number echoes in his mind, a relentless drumbeat that drowns out the distant sound of the marching band practicing near Millfield High's football field. He can almost smell the jungle again, wet mud, gunpowder, the metallic tang of blood. He can hear the screams, the ragged gasps of men clinging to life as he dragged them through hell. And worst of all, he can see the faces of those he couldn't save, their eyes staring through him in the quiet hours of sleepless nights. Shame coils in his gut, bitter as the black coffee he drinks alone at the diner. Why now? Why this kid with his wide eyes and innocent curiosity cracking open a wound Henry has spent decades trying to stitch shut? He forces his gaze away from the dog tag, fixing it on the ground where a single marigold petal lies crushed under his boot. His voice, when it finally comes, is rough, like gravel scraped raw. "You shouldn't have dug that up, kid. Some things are better left in the dark." But even as he says it, he knows it's useless. The past isn't a seed you can plant deep enough to forget. It's a weed, persistent, breaking through the hardest soil. Tyler's brow furrows, but he doesn't back down, his teenage stubbornness a mirror to the determination Henry once had in a far-off war. "But it's true, isn't it? You're a hero. You saved all those guys. Why hide it?" The word hero stabs at Henry, sharper than any bayonet. He flinches, his jaw tightening, and for a moment he's not in Ohio anymore. He's back in Vietnam, knee-deep in mud, his hands slick with someone else's blood, shouting orders over the roar of artillery, knowing every second could be his last. Or worse, someone else's. A hero? No. Heroes don't wake up every night choking on guilt, seeing the ghosts of the ones they failed. Heroes don't flinch at the crack of a car engine or freeze at the smell of smoke. He wants to snap at Tyler, to tell him to take that damn tag and throw it in the river, but the words stick in his throat, thick with decades of unspoken pain. Instead, Henry turns away, his shoulders hunching as if he can shield himself from the boy's gaze. He shoves the shears into his tool belt and starts walking toward the school's maintenance shed, his boots crunching over leaves that crackle like distant gunfire in his mind. But Tyler scrambles after him, his sneakers scuffing the dirt path. "Wait, Mr. Whitaker, I didn't mean to upset you. I thought it was amazing. My grandpa was in Vietnam too, and he always said the real heroes never talk about it. Is that why? Is that why you're so quiet?" The question hangs between them, heavy and raw, and Henry stops mid-step, his hand hovering over the shed door. His mind reels, caught between the urge to keep running from this conversation and the ache of knowing someone else, a kid no less, sees through the wall he's built. He thinks of his own silence, how it's been both armor and cage, protecting him from questions but trapping him with memories. The shed smells of motor oil and grass clippings, a grounding, familiar scent, but it's not enough to pull him back from the edge of that jungle in his mind. He turns his head just enough to meet Tyler's eyes, and the kid's expression, earnest, searching, cuts deeper than any scar on his knuckles. "Some stories hurt too much to tell," Henry mutters, his voice barely above a whisper. "You wouldn't understand." Tyler frowns, clutching the dog tag tighter. "Maybe not, but I want to. We've got a Veterans Day assembly coming up at school. Everyone's supposed to talk about someone who served. I was going to talk about my grandpa, but what if I talked about you people should know?" The suggestion lands like a grenade, exploding something raw inside Henry. His hands clench into fists, and for the first time in years, anger, hot, sharp, rises over the numbness. He spins around fully, his eyes flashing with a ferocity that makes Tyler take a half step back. "No, you don't get to decide that. You don't get to drag my name out like it's some kind of trophy. I ain't nobody's story, you hear me?" His voice cracks on the last word, betraying the fear beneath the rage. Fear of being seen, of having his pain turned into a spectacle, of reliving every moment under the curious stares of a small-town crowd. But even as he snaps, guilt gnaws at him. This kid doesn't know what he's asking, doesn't know the weight of those 27 lives, or the dozens more Henry couldn't carry to safety. The shame of surviving when so many didn't burns hotter than ever, a fire that no amount of gardening or solitude can smother. Tyler's face falls, and for a moment, Henry thinks he's pushed too hard, that the boy will turn and leave. But instead, Tyler shoves the dog tag and the yellowed newspaper clipping into his pocket and squares his shoulders. "Okay, I won't say anything if you don't want me to, but I'm not the only one who saw this stuff. I found it in the library archives, and Mrs. Carter, she's the librarian, she was looking through the same box. She mumbled something about how the school board might want to honor you, said it'd be good for community pride or whatever." The words are a gut punch, worse than the initial discovery. Henry's mind races, picturing the well-meaning but nosy Mrs. Carter, with her tight bun and her knack for gossip, spreading whispers through Millfield's tight-knit circles. Community pride. The phrase tastes sour. He doesn't want parades or plaques. He wants the quiet he's clawed for, the anonymity that lets him tend the school grounds without eyes on him. But now, that quiet feels like a fragile thing, a glass pane already spiderwebbed with cracks, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. The rest of the day passes in a haze. Henry finishes his tasks with mechanical precision, raking leaves, trimming hedges, clearing debris from the courtyard. But his mind is elsewhere, trapped in a loop of fear and memory. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows over the school, he sits on the edge of the bleachers by the football field, staring at the empty stands. The air carries the faint cheer of students practicing for homecoming, a reminder of a world moving on without him, a world he's never quite fit into since coming back from Vietnam. He pulls a small flask from his coat pocket, takes a sip of cheap whiskey, and lets the burn anchor him for a moment. But it can't drown out the echoes of Tyler's words, or the looming threat of exposure. He knows he can't stop Mrs. Carter or the school board if they decide to dig deeper. He knows small towns like Millfield thrive on stories, and a war hero gardener is too juicy to ignore. The thought makes his stomach churn. He's fought so hard to be invisible, to be just Old Hank, the man who keeps the grass green and the paths clear. But invisibility, he's learning, is a luxury he might not get to keep. That night, in the dim light of his trailer on the edge of town, Henry sits at the small kitchen table, the black and white photograph of his old platoon staring back at him from its frame. The faces of those men, some laughing, some grim, seem to watch him, waiting for something. He traces a finger over the glass, lingering on the spot where he stands near the edge, younger, harder, unscarred by the weight of what was to come. The trailer smells of stale coffee and mildew, the silence broken only by the faint rustle of cornstalks outside in the Ohio breeze. He pulls out a weathered tin box from under his bed, its hinges creaking as he opens it. Inside are letters, dozens of them, written in his own jagged handwriting during the war. Letters to his mother, to a sweetheart who never wrote back, to the families of men who didn't make it. He hasn't read them in years, hasn't dared to, but now with Tyler's discovery clawing at him, he feels the pull. His hands shake as he unfolds the first one, the paper yellowed and brittle, ink faded but still legible. "Ma, I don't know if I'll see you again. Did something today I ain't proud of but had to. Kept some boys alive, lost others, don't think I'll ever sleep right again." The words blur as his eyes burn, not from tears, he hasn't cried in decades, but from the raw ache of reliving that day, the day of the 27, the day he became something he never wanted to be, a name on a medal, a story in a clipping. He's startled by a knock at the door, sharp and sudden in the stillness. Heart pounding, he shoves the letter back into the box and stumbles to his feet, wiping his hands on his stained overalls as if he can wipe away the past. Through the small window, he sees a silhouette, tall and unfamiliar, not Tyler's slouched teenage frame. When he opens the door, he's met by a man in his late 50s, dressed in a neat flannel shirt and jeans, with a weathered face marked by time and grief. The stranger's eyes, a piercing blue, hold something Henry recognizes instantly: loss, the kind that mirrors his own. "Henry Whitaker?" the man asks, voice low but steady. Henry nods, wary, his hand tightening on the doorframe. "My name's Daniel Reed. I was in Nam too. Different unit, but I heard about what you did. My brother was one of the 27. He made it home because of you. Took me years to track you down." The words hit Henry like a freight train, stealing the air from his lungs. He remembers Reed, Private Thomas Reed, a lanky kid with a quick smile, one of the ones he'd dragged to safety through a hail of bullets, praying to a god he wasn't sure existed. Daniel steps closer, pulling a folded photograph from his pocket, showing a family, Thomas, older now, with kids of his own. "He passed last year, cancer, but he always talked about you, the guy who gave him a second chance. I had to say thank you." Henry's throat closes up, words failing him as they often do. He wants to say he's sorry, for Thomas's loss, for not doing more, for not being the hero they think he is, but all he can manage is a curt nod. Daniel doesn't push, just offers a small understanding smile, the kind that says he knows the weight Henry carries. "If you ever want to talk, I'm around. Live over in Dayton now. Not far." He leaves the photograph on the trailer's rickety porch table before turning to go, his footsteps fading into the night. Henry stares at the photo, the image of Thomas with his family searing into him, a reminder of what his actions meant to someone, even if he can't feel it himself. The guilt shifts, not lighter but different, tangled with a flicker of something he can't name, pride maybe, or just the ghost of purpose. But it's not enough to erase the dread of Millfield finding out, of his quiet life unraveling under the weight of a title he never wanted. The next morning, Henry walks the familiar path to school, but the air feels thicker, charged with a tension he can't shake. He passes the old oak trees lining the schoolyard, their gnarled branches a symbol of endurance, or maybe of things too stubborn to let go. His mind churns, replaying Daniel's visit, Tyler's questions, the looming threat of Mrs. Carter's gossip. At the school entrance, he spots Tyler waiting near the marigold beds Henry planted last spring, the boy's face a mix of guilt and determination. Before Henry can turn away, Tyler hurries over, hands stuffed in his pockets. "I'm sorry about yesterday, Mr. Whitaker. I didn't mean to push. I told Mrs. Carter I made a mistake, that the clipping wasn't about you, but she didn't believe me, said she's going to bring it up at the next board meeting. I just wanted you to know." Henry's stomach drops, the fragile hope of containing this slipping through his fingers like sand. He looks at Tyler, seeing not just a nosy kid but someone wrestling with his own sense of right and wrong, and for a moment, Henry feels a pang of kinship. But it's buried under the weight of what's coming, a public reckoning he's not ready for. might never be ready for. As the day wears on, Henry's tasks feel heavier, each rake of leaves a reminder of time slipping away. He finds himself near the school's courtyard, where a small American flag flutters on the rusty pole, its stripes faded but still stark against the grey sky. It's a piece of Americana, a symbol of a country he fought for, a country that moved on while he stayed stuck in the past. He stares at it, the fabric snapping in the wind, and feels the weight of a decision pressing down on him. He can't stop the school board or the town from digging into his story. Small towns are relentless that way, especially in places like Ohio, where history and pride are woven into every street corner. But he can control how he faces it. Run like he's done for decades, packing up his trailer and disappearing to another nowhere town? Or stay, face the questions, the stares, the title of hero that feels like a lie every time he hears it. His hands tremble at the thought, the scars on his knuckles a map of battles fought and lost. But Daniel's words echo, "Thomas made it home because of you," and Tyler's awkward apology, his clumsy attempt to protect Henry's secret, chips at the wall around his heart. That evening, as the sun sets over Millfield, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson, Henry makes his way to the diner on Elm Street, a place where he's always been a shadow, unnoticed. But tonight, he doesn't order his usual black coffee and sit alone. He slides into a booth across from Tyler, who looks up, startled, from a history textbook. The diner smells of grease and apple pie, the hum of small-town chatter, a backdrop to the storm in Henry's chest. "Kid," he starts, voice gruff but softer than before, "if they're going to talk about me, I want it done right. Not with half-truths or some shiny speech. If you're writing something for that assembly, I'll tell you what happened. Some of it. But it ain't pretty. And I ain't no hero. You gotta promise me that's clear." Tyler's eyes widen, a mix of awe and uncertainty, but he nods, gripping his pencil like it's a lifeline. "I promise, Mr. Whitaker. I just want to get it right." Henry leans back, the vinyl seat creaking under him, and exhales a breath he didn't know he was holding. It's not peace, not even close, but it's a step, a jagged, painful one, toward facing the past instead of running from it. And as he starts to speak, his voice low, halting, piecing together fragments of a day he's tried to forget, the weight shifts just enough to breathe through. The guilt, the ghosts, they're still there, lurking in every word, every pause. But for the first time in years, Henry lets someone in, lets the story spill like blood from an old wound, knowing it might destroy him, or just maybe, save him. He glances at Tyler, at the kid's rapt attention, and feels the diner's fluorescent lights burn a little brighter, a small beacon in the dark. And hey, if you're as invested in Henry's journey as we are, hit that subscribe button. There's so much more to uncover, and we're just getting started. Henry's decision to speak, to trust, sets the stage for something bigger, something Millfield and Henry himself might not be ready for. But the choice is made, and there's no turning back now. The days following Henry Whitaker's decision to share his story with Tyler are heavy, laden with a tension that seems to settle into the very soil of Millfield, Ohio. The diner on Elm Street, where Henry spoke those first halting words about Vietnam, feels different now, like a battlefield of its own, where he's laid bare his scars for the first time. Each morning, as he walks the familiar paths to Millfield High, the crunch of gravel under his boots sounds louder, more final, as if every step is a march toward something he can't control. The marigolds he planted last spring still line the school entrance, their golden petals a stark contrast to the grey weight in his chest, but even their vibrancy can't shield him from the whispers that have started to ripple through the small town. Mrs. Carter, the librarian with her penchant for gossip, has indeed brought up the newspaper clipping at the school board meeting, just as Tyler feared. Henry overhears fragments of conversation near the staff room, hushed voices mentioning Vietnam hero and Veterans Day tribute. The words stab at him, each one a reminder that his quiet life, the invisibility he's fought so hard for, is slipping through his fingers like sand. He grips his gardening shears tighter, his knuckles white, and focuses on trimming the hedges with a precision that borders on obsession, as if keeping the edges sharp can somehow hold back the chaos threatening to engulf him. Tyler, for his part, keeps his promise to handle Henry's story with care. The kid shows up every afternoon after school, notebook in hand, sitting cross-legged on the bleachers while Henry works on the football field. His questions are gentle but persistent, peeling back layers of memory Henry hasn't touched in decades. "What was it like, carrying someone through the gunfire?" Tyler asks one day, pencil poised, his brown eyes wide with a mix of awe and uncertainty. Henry's jaw tightens, his gaze fixed on a patch of uneven grass as if it holds the answer. The humid jungle air floods his mind, the weight of a wounded man over his shoulder, the burn of his own muscles screaming as bullets whizzed past. "Like carrying the whole damn world," he mutters, voice rough, barely audible over the wind. Tyler scribbles it down, and Henry feels exposed, raw, as if each word is a piece of himself he's handing over, not knowing if it'll be handled with care or turned into something shiny and false for the assembly. The tension builds with every passing day, a storm brewing inside him, fueled by the dread of standing before the town, of having his pain paraded under the guise of pride. He flinches at the thought of the Veterans Day event, now just a week away, where Tyler's speech will lay bare the story of the 27 lives. Every rake of leaves, every sweep of the broom, feels like a countdown to a moment he's not sure he can survive. As the news spreads, Millfield's residents start to look at Henry differently. The cashier at the local Kroger gives him a lingering smile, her eyes soft with unspoken gratitude. The principal, a stern man who's never said more than a grunt of thanks, stops by the courtyard one morning to shake Henry's hand, murmuring something about honoring service. Even the diner regulars, who've always left him to his solitary black coffee, start offering nods of respect or quiet words of thanks. It's suffocating. Henry's hands tremble as he shovels snow piling up early this October, the cold seeping into his bones, mirroring the icy fear of being seen not as old Hank, the gardener, but as a relic of a war he's tried to forget. He wants to bolt, to pack up his trailer, and vanish to some other nowhere town in Ohio or beyond, where no one knows his name or his ghosts. But Daniel Reed's visit, the photograph of Thomas with his family, the weight of a life saved, anchors him in a way he can't shake. And Tyler's earnestness, the kid's clumsy attempts to protect Henry's story, tugs at something long buried, a flicker of trust he thought was lost forever. So he stays, each day a battle, the tension coiling tighter until it feels like he might snap under the strain of anticipation and memory. The night before the Veterans Day assembly, Henry sits alone in his trailer on the edge of town, the cornfields outside whispering in the night breeze. The black and white photograph of his platoon stares back at him from the nightstand. The faces of those men, some gone, some lingering in his nightmares, etched into the dim light. He pulls out the tin box of letters again, the one he opened after Daniel's visit, and unfolds a letter written to his mother on the day of the 27. The ink is faded, the paper brittle, but the words still cut deep. "I kept going till I couldn't no more, Ma. Saved as many as I could. But the ones I lost, they're louder than the ones I saved. Don't know if I'll ever be right again." His eyes burn, not with tears, he hasn't shed those since the war, but with the weight of reliving that day, of knowing it'll be spoken aloud tomorrow in front of hundreds of eyes at Millfield High. He grips the letter, fingers trembling, and considers burning it, burning all of them, as if destroying the words could erase the past. But he doesn't. Instead, he tucks it back into the box, his resolve hardening like the frost outside. If this story is coming out, it'll come out on his terms, raw and unpolished, not as some polished tale of heroism, but as the jagged truth of survival and loss. The morning of the assembly dawns cold and grey, the sky over Millfield heavy with the promise of early snow. Henry arrives at the school before the first bell, dressed in his usual worn overalls and baseball cap, but there's a stiffness to his shuffle, a weight in his shoulders that no one else can see. The gymnasium is already buzzing when he slips in through a side door, the bleachers packed with students, teachers, and families, the air thick with the scent of gym floor polish and anticipation. American flags line the walls, their red and white stripes a vivid reminder of a duty Henry fulfilled at a cost he can't articulate. He stays near the back, half hidden behind a stack of folding chairs, his heart pounding as the principal takes the podium to introduce the Veterans Day program. Tyler is third on the list, and when the kid steps up wearing a too big button-down shirt and holding a crumpled sheet of notebook paper, Henry's breath catches. He wants to look away, to escape the weight of what's coming, but his feet are rooted, his hands clenched at his sides. The tension is a physical thing, pressing against his ribs, as Tyler begins to speak, voice shaky but clear, reading the story Henry helped him craft. Not of a hero, but of a man broken and rebuilt by war. Tyler's words spill out, painting a picture of muddy jungles and desperate choices, of 27 lives pulled from the jaws of death, of countless nights haunted by the ones who didn't make it. The gym falls silent, the usual teenage restlessness replaced by a stillness that feels almost sacred. Henry feels every eye on him, even from his shadowed corner, as Tyler names him, not with fanfare, but with quiet respect, honoring his wish to keep the story grounded in pain rather than glory. "Mr. Whitaker told me he's no hero," Tyler says, voice cracking slightly. "But I think carrying that many lives, even when it broke something in you, is more heroic than any medal." The words land like a punch, raw and real, and Henry's throat tightens, the burn behind his eyes fiercer now. He's not prepared for what comes next. Tyler's final line, a question to the crowd. Can we show him we see what he did, not just for those men, but for all of us, by carrying on even when it hurt? The applause starts slow, then builds, a wave of sound that crashes over Henry, threatening to drown him. Students stand, teachers nod, and even Daniel Reed, who Henry spots in the crowd, rises with a look of quiet gratitude. That's too much, the weight of being seen after decades of hiding, and Henry's hands shake as he grips the edge of a chair, fighting the urge to flee. Then comes the moment of truth. As the applause fades, the principal calls Henry to the front, a gesture meant as honor but feeling like exposure. The crowd watches, expectant as Henry hesitates, every muscle tensed against the spotlight. But Tyler steps down from the podium, walking toward him with something small in his hand. The dog tag, the tarnished piece of metal that started all of this. The kid doesn't push, just holds it out, his eyes saying what words can't. "You don't have to be alone with this anymore." And in that gesture, something cracks open in Henry, a wall he's built over decades crumbling just enough to let a sliver of light through. He takes the dog tag, fingers brushing the engraved name, Whitaker, H, and feels the weight of it, not just as a relic of war but as a bridge to the present. Slowly he steps forward, the gym silent again, and stands beside Tyler, not for recognition, but to face the past with someone who's shown him it's okay to be seen. His voice when he speaks is gruff, barely above a whisper, but it carries, "I didn't do it for thanks. Did it 'cause I had to. But I'm glad some made it home." He looks at Daniel in the crowd, then at Tyler, and nods once, a gesture of forgiveness, for himself maybe, for surviving when others didn't. The crowd doesn't erupt again. There's just a murmur, a shared breath, as if they understand this isn't about celebration, but about bearing witness to a man's quiet courage. In the weeks that follow, Henry's life transforms, though not in the loud, dramatic ways he feared. The town doesn't erect statues or throw parades. Millfield's too small, too practical for that. But there's a shift, subtle yet profound, in how he moves through his days. The cashier at Kroger starts asking about his favorite plants, not his war stories. The diner regulars invite him to sit with them, not out of pity, but because they've glimpsed the man behind the silence. And Tyler becomes a constant presence, helping with the gardening after school, not asking for more stories, but sharing his own, about his grandpa, about history class, about dreams of college. Henry doesn't flinch as often at loud noises now, though the ghosts still linger in his quieter moments. His routine at Millfield High holds steady, planting, mowing, raking, shoveling, but there's a new rhythm to it, a lightness in his step, as if sharing the burden has eased the load just enough to breathe. The biggest change, though, is a sacrifice he makes, one that cuts deep but feels necessary. Late one evening, he drives to the town's small veterans memorial, a modest stone slab surrounded by fading wreaths, and places the dog tag there, nestled among the flowers. It's not a grand gesture, just a quiet renunciation of the identity that's chained him to pain for so long. He doesn't need the metal to remember. The scars, both visible and hidden, are enough. Letting it go is his way of saying he's more than that day in Vietnam, more than the 27, more than the guilt. It's a step toward being just Henry, the gardener again. On a crisp November afternoon, as the first real snow dusts the ground in delicate flakes, Henry stands near the school's old oak trees, watching the branches sway under the weight of winter's arrival. At his feet, a single marigold petal, bright against the grey, clings to life despite the frost, a stubborn reminder of endurance. The schoolyard is quiet, the students inside for the day, and in that stillness Henry feels the ghosts recede just a little, their voices softer, not gone but less demanding. He thinks of the 27, of Thomas Reed's family, of the letters still tucked away in his trailer, and realizes that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about making room for the present while carrying the past with a lighter grip. Time, he muses, is a strange thing. It buries some wounds and unearths others, but it also offers a chance to mend, to replant, to grow something new even in the hardest soil. War breaks men in ways that can't be fixed, not fully, but there's a quiet strength in rebuilding, in letting others tend to the broken places just as he tends to the earth. His reflection settles on Recomeço, a restart, not as a grand transformation, but as small, deliberate steps toward a life where silence isn't just armor, but a space for peace. And if Henry's journey has stirred something in you, if it's reminded you of the quiet battles fought by those around us, take a moment to comment below with, "I see the scars." Share this story with someone who needs to know they're not alone in carrying their own ghosts. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances, and subscribe to join us as we uncover more stories of hidden courage and healing. Because sometimes, the loudest victories are the ones whispered in the heart.